Hi, I'm Odellin. I helped fund my sister's dream wedding, only to be seated by the restroom, like a forgotten guest at my own funeral. I didn't argue. I didn't cry. I just watched, and then quietly took everything back. Why would a sister go that far to erase me? And more importantly, what did I do next? Before we dive in, tell me, where are you watching from and what time is it right now? Drop it in the comments. Let's see who else has ever been placed at the wrong table. The envelope was ivory and thick, with gold-pressed lettering that caught the light. It looked like the kind of invitation you'd frame if you were the one being celebrated. My name was printed in perfect serif, without a single smudge or personal touch. Miss Odellin Langford. No note, no handwriting, no "can't wait to see you," or "you've meant the world to me." Just a name, like a label on a file folder. I flipped it over. Nothing. The RSVP card was already marked confirmed. The +1 box crossed out in sharp, assertive pen. My sister hadn't sent this. The event planner had. I stood by the kitchen counter, blinking under the soft light. Outside the window, spring rain ticked across the patio like a gentle warning. I set the invitation down and leaned both palms on the marble island. There was a subtle sting building beneath my ribs, not sharp enough to name, but deep enough to feel. It was just a piece of paper. But something about it, something in its perfection, felt like erasure. 2 years ago, Sierra had called me at 2 a.m., sobbing about her lease falling through and her spa dreams crumbling. I had just paid off my car, a navy blue Corolla, reliable as hell. I sold it the following week, wiring her $12,000 so she could secure the space near Biltmore Avenue. She promised I'd get it back triple, her word, not that I ever asked for repayment. I took on a second shift at the hospital that spring, missed my vacation, and canceled a long overdue dental procedure because we were already overbooked. And tired. And Sierra had a dream. That's what older sisters do, right? We give, we fix, we smile through it. But standing there, staring at my name typed like I was a client, not her family, something twisted. I grabbed my phone and texted, "Me. Let me know the rehearsal time. I'll take off work. Sierra." No need. We're just keeping it low-key with the bridal party. Low-key. That word hit harder than it should have. Not "we'd love to have you," not "you're part of this," just exclusion, gift wrapped in emoji and pretense. I told myself I was overreacting. Maybe there was a reason. Later that day, Kinsey, her maid of honor, posted stories from the Ridgeview Resort. Spa brunch with champagne flutes and white robes captioned, "Rehearsal done right." There they were. All of them, laughing, sipping, posing, except me. Not even a mention. No tag, like I didn't exist. I watched it 3 times, the video of Sierra toasting, her voice shrill and giggly as she declared, "To the girls who've been with me through everything." Everything. I nearly dropped my phone. I sat on the edge of my bed that night, the invitation in my lap like it was something I needed to study. The wording, the spacing, the RSVP details. I knew the Ridgeview venue. I'd been the one to recommend it, back when she'd been hunting for elevated but still budget-conscious. I remembered walking the grounds with her, helping her ask questions about capacity, linens, catering. Back then, she'd turned to me and said, "I couldn't do this without you." Now I was being handled, managed, an afterthought at best. There was a phrase our grandmother used to say, back when Sierra and I would fight over closet space, "The one who gives more gets seen less." It didn't make sense to me at 12. It makes sense now. I opened my email, searched Ridgeview, found receipts, deposits. My credit card had held the vendor for the linens, $1,200, because Sierra's card got declined last minute. No thank you note, no confirmation from her, just a passing "you're a lifesaver" in a phone call about something else. I didn't need gratitude. I needed not to feel like I was being erased from my own life. I picked the invitation up one more time and ran my finger along the edge. The cardstock was thick, smooth, cold. So was the name, my name, stamped like a reminder, not of who I was to her, but of what I wasn't. I stared at the text again, then whispered aloud, not for anyone else to hear, just to feel it land in the air. "This is going to be the last time." The sky was overcast. the kind of gray that muted everything into soft, dismal tones. I pulled into the Ridgeview lot 15 minutes early, just as the valet waved me into the side circle. He barely looked up when I handed him my keys. Inside the lobby, everything smelled like over-polished wood and perfume too expensive for its own good. I took the elevator to the ballroom level, smoothing my dress, a soft mauve chiffon I had chosen carefully. 3 hours at the salon, 2 sets of heated rollers, and a credit card swipe I shouldn't have justified. But I had. Because it was Sierra's day. Because appearances still mattered. Or so I told myself. The guest list stood near the entrance on a gold-framed easel. Rows of elegant embossed name cards were clipped neatly to silk ribbon, arranged alphabetically. I scanned them. No Langford. I blinked and checked again. Then I saw it, off to the side, taped crookedly to the bottom ribbon. A yellow sticky note. My name written in ballpoint pen, barely legible. Miss Odellyn Langford, table 14. No card, no calligraphy, no care. "Excuse me," I said to a staff member walking by. "Could you help me find my seat?" He paused. Young, maybe college age. His eyes darted toward my chest, then away, embarrassed. "Yes, ma'am. This way." He led me past chandeliers, past tables layered in ivory and eucalyptus, past the stage with the 7-tier cake and live harpist. Then he turned left, toward the service hallway. The scent changed instantly. Industrial soap, garlic, heat. Table 14 was wedged between the double doors to the kitchen and the restrooms. My chair was facing the wall, angled slightly as if forgotten mid-adjustment. There was a linen napkin tossed on it, a bit of someone's lipstick staining one corner. The air felt warmer here, heavier. There was no view of the main room, just a faint echo of string instruments and muffled laughter. I stood still for a moment, unsure if this was a joke. The server smiled tightly. "They said you'd be here. Let me know if you need anything." Then he disappeared into the kitchen. I sat down slowly, the chair creaking beneath me. The floor underfoot was sticky, probably from spilled gravy or cleaning fluid. My shoes caught slightly when I moved them. I pressed my napkin against my lap, not for manners, but to avoid the residue. On the wall beside me, a chipped mirror reflected a sliver of the reception. Golden lights, raised glasses, perfect people. I adjusted my posture, straightened my back, tried to breathe, but all I could smell was dish soap and marinara. From this angle, I couldn't see Sierra. I could only hear her, laughing like she hadn't slept through my calls last week. Music swelled as the bridal party was introduced. Cheers erupted. I heard Kinsey call, "And the woman of the hour, our radiant bride, Sierra." More cheers, laughter, forks clinking against glasses. Someone whistled. And me? I was here, near the mop bucket closet. There was a floral arrangement above the restroom sign. Hydrangeas, fake. One of them had a smudge of something brown at the edge of the petal. Someone walked by and paused. A young server, early 20s, messy bun, soft eyes. She hesitated, looked at me, then stepped closer. "You didn't deserve this," she whispered, barely audible. I looked up. Our eyes met. She held the moment. Then she slipped away before I could say anything. My throat tightened, not with sadness, but recognition. I wasn't imagining this. I wasn't being sensitive or dramatic. I was being erased, quietly, thoroughly. I reached for the water glass in front of me, smudged rim, probably reused from another table. I didn't drink it. Instead, I folded my hands in my lap and stared at the paper napkin they'd left me, creased like it had been used before, like it was something someone grabbed last minute when they realized they'd forgotten about me. I looked down at my dress, the soft fabric now damp at the back where it had pressed against the sticky chair. The color looked different in this dim hallway light. Duller, cheaper. My mind wandered back to the day Sierra graduated college. I had worked 3 back-to-back shifts at the hospital that week to afford her cap, gown, and the announcement photos. She had hugged me tight then, cried against my neck, whispered, "You're the only reason I made it." That was 12 years ago. Now she couldn't spare me a real seat, or a name card, or dignity. I hadn't expected gratitude. I hadn't expected applause, but I hadn't expected to be treated like baggage either. A waiter rolled by with a tray full of appetizers, crab cakes, puff pastry, tiny ceramic spoons with chilled cucumber soup. None of it was for this table. This was the dead zone. No servers came here unless they had to, because who wants to linger by the restrooms? I adjusted my posture again. My hands were still folded, but now my grip was tighter, nails pressing into the backs of my fingers, my breath slow and measured. If this is where they see me, they won't like where I go next. I didn't shift in my seat. I didn't sip my water or straighten my dress again. I just sat, still, invisible, forgotten, while the music changed from upbeat jazz to a slow, saccharine instrumental that I recognized from a bridal Pinterest playlist Sierra once emailed me during the early days of planning. They were starting the first dance. I leaned ever so slightly toward the kitchen door, just enough to catch a sliver of the ballroom through the narrow glass pane. Sierra stood with her back to me, gown glistening under soft string lights, her veil trailing behind like smoke. Elijah held her waist with rehearsed delicacy, guiding her in slow circles while the crowd sighed and reached for phones. They looked like a couple in a commercial for happiness, curated, airbrushed, but all I saw was the back of a dream I had paid for. A part of me knew I should look away, but I didn't. I watched that sliver of light and lace and lies like it might offer me answers, or apologies. Instead, it offered silence, the kind that confirms something without saying a word. My phone buzzed in my lap. A message from a coworker, hospital coverage question. I ignored it and opened Instagram instead, needing something to pull me out of that fluorescent hallway and the sound of the kitchen trays rattling behind me. Sierra had already posted. The photos were glossy, already edited. Professional shots from earlier that morning. Hair and makeup prep, champagne glasses clinking, Sierra posing under a floral arch with Kinsey and the rest of the bridal party. I started scrolling. The smiles were wide, the lighting perfect. Captioned, "Surrounded by love, every detail matters. Every detail." I kept scrolling. There was one photo I remembered being in. From last month's cake tasting at Magnolia's downtown. I had driven them there, paid for the upgraded flavor tier, and snapped the photo myself on Kinsey's phone. Here it was, posted. But I wasn't in it. Just Sierra and Kinsey, holding mini forks, laughing. I knew the original image. I had stood right beside Sierra, my hand still holding the tasting form. They'd cropped me out. I zoomed in on the edge. My sleeve, barely visible, a ghost limb. Every photo was like that, group shots where I'd stood in the back, now tightly cropped to exclude me. My face erased, my presence dissolved for aesthetic symmetry. Like I was too much, or not enough. I stared at my screen, pulse rising. It wasn't about seating anymore, or a forgotten invitation. This was a narrative rewrite, a public declaration that I didn't exist in her world, at least not in the version she was sharing. A flash pulled me back, someone taking a photo near the cake table. Laughter echoed again, louder this time. I tucked my phone into my purse and tried to will away the tightness in my chest, but then the memory hit. Sierra had strep throat when she was 6. Our mom had gone to Raleigh that weekend with some guy she'd been seeing. I was 13 and scared. I'd never taken care of anyone before. But I made chicken soup from a powdered mix, held cold towels to Sierra's forehead, and read The Velveteen Rabbit aloud on repeat. That third night, she stirred in her sleep and whispered, half dreaming, "You're better than Mommy. You're my mommy, sis." It was the first time anyone had ever told me I was enough. She didn't remember it. I knew that. But I had carried it like a badge, tucked away in a hidden pocket of my soul for all these years. Now I couldn't stop wondering if even that moment had been mine, or just something she'd outgrown. The kitchen doors swung open for a second, a waiter passing through. Music and applause spilled into my little corner, but none of it reached me. I was still stuck in that childhood bedroom, holding a soup bowl with trembling hands, thinking I had done something noble. I hadn't known back then that sometimes love doesn't grow into recognition, that sometimes being the one who shows up makes you the one they use to build a better story, one they eventually edit you out of. I looked back at the restroom door. Someone had left a paper towel hanging half out of the trash bin. The scent of floral air freshener mixed poorly with the lingering aroma of chicken marsala. I stood up and paced slowly, just enough to shake off the tightness in my spine. Then I sat again, this time facing the mirror mounted above the dish return. It was fogged with steam, speckled with watermarks, but I could still see my reflection. Not my makeup, not the dress, just the woman behind it. A woman who had been cropped from more than just photos. A woman who was finally seeing what that meant. I took one long breath, steadying my hands on the edge of the table. If I don't exist in her world, I thought, then I'm free to leave it. The ballroom lights dimmed as the MC tapped his mic and asked for quiet. A slow hush settled over the guests like fog. Through the tiny rectangular window in the swinging kitchen door, I saw chairs pull inward and heads turn toward the dance floor. Somewhere behind me, the clatter of silver trays briefly stopped. The speeches were beginning. I didn't need to hear them to know what they would say. Still, I leaned just enough to catch pieces of the audio through the open door behind a rushing server. Clark, Sierra's stepfather, cleared his throat over the mic and chuckled. "You know, I've known Sierra since she was 9, and even then she was telling people how she'd walk down the aisle one day in designer heels and nothing less." The crowd laughed. I didn't. "She's always known what she wanted," he continued. "Always had vision, drive, heart." I sat still, each word stacking heavier than the last. Not a single syllable about who picked Sierra up from choir rehearsals when Mom forgot, or who held her hair when she threw up before her high school debate finals. Just Clark and his revisionist fairy tale. When Marla took the mic, his second wife, the one Sierra called her bonus mom, her voice dripped with practiced warmth. "To our Sierra," she said, "the daughter I always dreamed of having." My jaw tightened. Our Sierra? The daughter she dreamed of? The girl I bathed, fed, shielded? The one I taught to braid her hair, to stand up straight in class presentations, to never leave the house without deodorant. But tonight, none of that history existed. I was background noise. My name didn't surface once, not as a sister, not as a caregiver, not as the person who helped fund the very floral arch they were standing beneath. I pressed my napkin to my lips, my stomach twisted. I told myself it was just the kitchen steam, not the humiliation creeping through my chest like smoke from a slow fire. "You're not allowed to feel this," I whispered silently. "You chose to come." And yet, my hands trembled under the table. I stood to get air. Not far, just a step into the hallway where the crowd couldn't see me. A voice caught me off guard. "Oh, wow! I didn't know anyone was sitting back here." A woman, maybe a cousin from our dad's side. Her eyes widened for a split second. Then she smiled awkwardly and kept walking. Like I was a surprise. Like she'd found a staff member off duty or an old classmate someone forgot to invite. Not family. I stood frozen for a beat, her words echoing louder than the applause erupting behind the ballroom doors. That moment didn't come from a place of cruelty. It was worse. It came from authenticity. She genuinely hadn't expected anyone important to be seated where I was. And that's when it hit me. I wasn't an oversight. I wasn't accidentally sidelined. I was placed, intentionally removed, out of view, out of frame, just close enough to fulfill obligation, just far enough to erase. I walked back to my seat, each step measured. I didn't smooth my dress this time, didn't fix my posture. I simply sat. A few feet away, the restroom door opened and closed. The scent of synthetic citrus rolled through the air again. The server from earlier glanced my way. Her eyes flickered with sympathy, but she didn't approach this time. Smart girl. She knew better than to interrupt someone reaching their breaking point. I no longer needed a tissue or an excuse. The fog in my chest was clearing. The performances were happening in there, on the ballroom floor, beneath the curated lighting and the lies they'd all agreed to rehearse. But in here, in this overlooked hallway corner with the dish return squeaking and the air too warm to breathe clearly, I found clarity. They had built this moment without me. They had reimagined our family story into something easier to digest, prettier to photograph. Well, they could keep their fiction. Because the real architect of this wedding wasn't sitting at the sweetheart table or smiling in the toasts. She was sitting by the toilets, watching, remembering, and calculating. I know exactly what I'm going to do, I thought, reaching for my clutch. Not yet, but soon. I looked back toward the glow of the reception, where Sierra twirled under twinkle lights and fake laughter. They built this moment without me, so I'll remove what I built for them. They didn't know I was watching, or maybe they didn't care. I returned to my seat behind the kitchen doors, that half-lit corridor they'd tucked me into. Like an afterthought, they couldn't quite leave off the guest list. Someone had left a plate in front of me. Cold chicken breast, a wilted piece of asparagus, and a biscuit that looked like it had been baked last week and forgotten on a pantry shelf. I didn't touch it, just stared at it, hollow. From inside the ballroom, a round of applause burst out. Laughter followed, probably a toast or some story about Sierra's strength or vision. I leaned back in my chair and let the noise blur into nothing. Then my phone buzzed. I didn't even want to check it, but the reflex was faster than my anger. I turned the screen over in my palm and glanced down. Venmo. I opened the app without thinking, more from habit than interest. That's when I saw it. A public payment. From Sierra to Kinsey. The caption read, "Auntie O's got it all covered. Wedding vibes." The words hit harder than the speeches ever could. There were 2 champagne glasses clinking beside the text. Confetti emojis. A smirking pink manicure emoji. They thought it was funny. Thought I wouldn't see. Or worse, they wanted me to. I stared at the screen so long the letters started to blur. My thumb hovered above the app icon before I pressed down and held, then deleted it. I didn't need a receipt trail to know what I'd given. Thousands of dollars, months of extra shifts, nights alone, eating leftovers while they planned shrimp towers and signature cocktails. All of it for this. To be mocked, publicly, stripped of dignity and repurposed into a punchline. I slid my phone into my clutch and sat still for a moment. The kind of still that makes the air around you feel heavy, like everything has shifted and the floor hasn't caught up yet. Then I stood. No noise, no announcement, just a slow, quiet rise. I walked past the swinging door. The silver edge banged against the wall as I passed, but I didn't flinch. I didn't look left or right, just forward, down the hallway, into the side corridor where the venue's Wi-Fi barely reached, but just enough. I opened my browser, logged into the online dashboard for the wedding planning site. I clicked on the tab marked Vendors. There it was. Florist, band, photographer, bartending service. And beneath each name, my billing information. I opened the florist tab first. A pop-up loaded slowly. It showed the upcoming brunch order. Table centerpieces, a giant floral backdrop for Sierra's morning after content shoot, and the bouquet toss she wanted to restage because she didn't like her arm angle the first time. I stared at the screen. The blinking cursor next to the words, "Cancel remaining balance?" The question was simple. The answer was simpler. But not yet. Not until dessert. Let them eat the cake I paid for. Let them sip rosé under fairy lights. Let them dance and clink their glasses. Let the illusion live a few hours longer. I wasn't here to ruin their wedding. I was here to end their fantasy. I hit the back arrow and left the cancellation tab open. My finger hovered above the confirm button. I'd leave it there for now. 1 breath. 2. I could hear the band playing something soft, maybe their first dance reprise. I could imagine Sierra smiling through it, imagining likes and hashtags. She didn't know the floor she stood on was already starting to crack. I turned my phone screen off and tucked it into my bag. Soon. I sat in the back of a rideshare, the hum of the wheels almost matching the quiet storm building in my chest. The venue faded behind us, glowing faintly in the rearview mirror. Somewhere inside, someone was raising a glass. Somewhere, they were laughing over cake, but I was done feeding their fantasy. Back at the hotel, the hallway smelled like polished wood and eucalyptus. I slipped my heels off before I even reached the door. My feet were done pretending. Inside, the room was still untouched. My dress still hung neatly on the closet door. The folded note from the front desk still unread on the nightstand. Everything looked exactly as it had that morning, except me. I turned on the desk lamp, pulled out my tablet, and sat cross-legged on the edge of the bed. I opened my financial dashboard, and there they were, 2 charges. Quiet, hidden, but unmistakable. The first, a luxury wine tasting bar downtown. I'd never been, but it was the place Sierra had mentioned when she giggled about doing something bougie for the bridesmaids. The second, a rehearsal dinner upgrade, at the very venue where I'd been parked next to the restrooms, conveniently excluded from the toast. Both charges from my card. No one had asked. No one had even bothered to cover the tracks. They just assumed I'd accept it like I always had, that I'd sigh and tell myself it was for family. But tonight, I wasn't the family they'd curated. I was just the wallet they forgot to hide. I opened my contacts and started dialing. First, the florist. Hi, yes, this is Odell in Langford. Please cancel the Sunday floral setup. Yes, I understand the contract. I'm choosing not to fulfill the remaining balance due to breach of agreed terms. Next, the band. We'll no longer need the second set. Yes, effective immediately. Thank you. Then the bar service. No cocktail hour extension, cancel the shift. Yes, I'll handle the penalties. Each call was short, calm, civil, but beneath my tone was something that hadn't lived there in a long time. Steel. This wasn't pettiness. This wasn't revenge. This was reclamation. My final email was to the day of wedding coordinator. Subject, adjustment to coverage. I stared at the message before sending it. Then I hit send without a second thought. Done. I set the tablet down, stretched my back, and rolled my shoulders. The weight of years peeled off in quiet layers. I got up, poured a glass of cold water from the carafe by the minibar, and walked to the window. Asheville glimmered beneath the moonlight. I could see the ridge in the distance, and somewhere out there, maybe half a mile, was the echo of their celebration. My phone vibrated on the dresser. I ignored it. Buzz. Buzz. Another one. This time I looked. Missed calls. Sierra, 3, text from her. Did you do something? Another from Kinsey. The band just left? Girl, what's going on? And one from my niece. Hey, Auntie O, everyone's freaking out. Did something happen? I stared at the screen until it dimmed. No, nothing happened. Not yet. But something had shifted. I took another sip of water, walked to the closet, and took down the dress. Still hung straight. Still perfect. Untouched. But I wouldn't be wearing it again. I laid it on the bed, walked barefoot across the cool tile, and stood in front of the mirror. The woman staring back didn't look shaken. She looked ready. They threw me behind the curtain, I whispered. Tonight, I pulled the plug on the spotlight. I didn't sleep. Not really. I lay still in bed, the hotel room cloaked in a heavy silence. The glow from the street lamps pooled along the edges of the curtains, casting soft amber light over my unpacked suitcase and the dress I never wore. My phone, face down, buzzed once, then again. I didn't check it. Instead, I kept hearing it, like a whisper I couldn't shut out. The red folder. I hadn't thought about it in years, hadn't touched it in nearly a decade, but now it pressed against my memory with a weight I couldn't explain. That drawer in my bedroom, the one that always stuck. The folder buried beneath socks, and the remnants of another version of me, back when I still believed being the reliable one meant I belonged. I got dressed before the sun rose, tossed my things in a weekender bag, and checked out without breakfast. The drive home was silent except for the low hum of NPR reruns and my own shallow breath. Asheville's early morning mist hovered over the highway like a veil. It felt poetic, too soft for what I was about to uncover. When I stepped into my house, the stillness wrapped around me. Everything was exactly where I'd left it. The roses in the front yard were blooming, wild, and untrimmed. The kitchen smelled faintly of lavender cleaner. I didn't even take off my shoes. I went straight to my bedroom, yanked open the dresser, and forced the drawer past its stubborn catch. And there it was, red, frayed at the edges, the folder I hadn't dared open since before Mom died. Inside, tucked neatly between old tax documents and photocopies of my nursing license, was a yellowed envelope. No return address, just my name in my father's careful script. I opened it. The letter was dated 9 years ago. My breath caught before I finished the first paragraph. He wrote about Sierra, how she had drained their mother's emergency savings account, how, when confronted, Sierra swore it was me, that I had borrowed it to cover rent and was too ashamed to admit it. And worst, he admitted he believed her, at least at first. But then he discovered a receipt, proof it had been Sierra all along. He never said anything. Not to Mom, not to me. He wrote, "By the time I knew the truth, it felt too late. You had already pulled away. I didn't want to lose both of you. So I let the silence stay. I let the paper fall into my lap. 9 years. I had spent 9 years wondering why my mother's trust had grown brittle, why her phone calls had become shorter, why she looked at me like I was someone who needed forgiving. Sierra hadn't just lied. She had rewritten history, erased my place in the family, and filled it with her version of me, a version that didn't exist. I stared at the floor for a long time, the house echoing with the ache of that realization. Then another memory slid forward like a blade. Darla. She had been there the day Mom yelled at me, accused me of taking what wasn't mine. Darla had stood behind the kitchen island, hands folded, saying nothing. I remembered thinking, she'll speak up. She knows the truth. But she didn't. She just looked away. Years later at the wedding, Darla had looked right at me from across the hall. I was sitting alone by the restroom. She saw me, and she turned away again. That was her choice. And now, this was mine. I folded the letter gently, tucked it back into the red folder, and walked through the house. Every photo on the wall, every blanket I'd bought for Mom after her diagnosis, every dish I'd packed up from her old apartment. They all echoed the same truth. I had been everything for them. Caretaker, ATM, scapegoat, and I was done. I placed the folder in my bag, zipped it closed, and looked around one last time. This wasn't my sanctuary anymore. It was a museum of sacrifice, one I'd been told to tend to, but never truly live in. My phone buzzed again. 11 unread messages. I didn't read them. I didn't need to. I pressed the power button and shut it off. This time, they would wait. Because now, it was my turn to rewrite the story. I hadn't turned my phone back on. The house was still, save for the steady hum of the fridge and the sound of my spoon stirring the lukewarm coffee in my favorite chipped mug. Afternoon light angled through the blinds, striping the floor like prison bars I didn't realize I'd been inside until recently. Then came the knock, a soft tap, then 2 sharper ones. It didn't go away. I stood at the threshold between kitchen and hallway, mug in hand, breath quiet. Through the frosted glass pane of the front door, I saw her silhouette. Arms folded, shoulders stiff. Sierra. Of course it was her. I opened the door, not fully, just wide enough to let silence in. I didn't speak. I didn't invite. I just stepped aside. She walked in like she was entitled to the air in my home. Her heels clicked against the hardwood, echoing more than they should have in a place that hadn't welcomed her in years. Her mascara was smudged, probably from tears, though I couldn't tell if they were real or just convenient. "You didn't have to humiliate me," she blurted, voice tight like a violin string pulled too far. I didn't respond. I walked ahead of her and placed a small box on the coffee table, neat, prepared, as deliberate as everything they tried to erase me from. Inside were printed invoices, the band, the florist, the venue, all under my name. Then I set the envelope on top, the one in my father's handwriting. She looked down at it like it was radioactive. "What is this?" she asked, voice faltering. "Read it," I said. And I sat down, not beside her, across from her. She opened it. Her hands shook slightly. Her lips parted, then closed, then parted again like they couldn't quite settle on the right lie. "That was a long time ago. You blamed me for stealing from Mom. You let them punish me, and you watched it happen." "I was young," she whispered. "I didn't know what else to do. But you knew how to keep quiet, and you've kept quiet ever since." She dropped the letter and leaned back like it might leap at her. Her eyes welled, but I'd seen that performance too many times. I stayed still. "You could have just talked to me," she offered. I laughed once, low, tired. Talk to the woman who made sure I sat next to the restrooms? Who cropped me out of every photo, every speech, every plan, despite me paying for nearly every detail of your fairy tale? She reached for an apology, something like, "I didn't mean to hurt you." But it didn't matter what she meant. "You did, over and over," I said. "And you made sure everyone saw me disappear quietly. You thought that would be the end of it." Tears began to fall. They didn't move me. "Please, Odellyn," she whispered. "We're sisters." "No," I said softly. "We were sisters. Before you decided the version of me that served you was enough. Before you let everyone believe that version was the whole truth." I stood. "You erased me from your wedding, from your story, from our family. So I erased the part of me that still needed to be thanked." She opened her mouth, then closed it. I could see the gears spinning, searching for guilt to offer that didn't cost her pride. I picked up the box and walked to the door. She followed. At the threshold, I handed her the box. She hesitated, searching my eyes for something. A soft spot, a last thread she could tug. There wasn't one left. She held the box like it burned. "Tell them whatever you want," I said. "I won't be listening." And I closed the door. I didn't watch the news that week. I didn't check to see who posted what. The only screen I faced was the one that held my recipe for roasted garlic chicken, which was now filling every corner of my home with a warmth I hadn't felt in years. It had been 7 days since Sierra walked out my front door, her hands full of truths she'd spent a lifetime avoiding. 7 days of silence, no apology, no explanation, just absence. And oddly enough, it wasn't loud. It was peaceful. My house was alive tonight. Laughter rang out from the dining room, bouncing off the old wooden beams and tile floor. I'd pulled out every chair I owned, even the mismatched one from the garage that always wobbled just a little. Around that table sat 6 people. Not a single one shared my bloodline, but every one of them had seen me, really seen me, when my own family turned their heads. Delphine, my neighbor who used to slip warm banana bread onto my porch when I worked late hospital shifts. Mr. Henderson, my former biology teacher, who still remembered my college scholarship interview and always said, "You've been extraordinary since you were 16. Nurse Janet, who held my hand the night Mom passed and whispered, "You don't have to be strong alone." And 3 others, each one carrying pieces of me I had nearly forgotten. I lifted my glass. "To new tables," I said. Delphine tapped her glass against mine. "To finally sitting where you belong." It wasn't some grand toast. No orchestral music played, no applause. But the air felt charged with something better than fanfare, truth. Earlier that morning, I'd posted a single image, just one. It was a photo of the check I'd written for Sierra's wedding, the same check they used to book the Ridgeview Resort, the band, the caterers. I didn't write a caption. I didn't need to. The comments came fast and raw. "She never deserved your silence. This broke me. Thank you for sharing what we never could." Some messaged privately. Strangers, women with sisters who'd cut them out, daughters who paid for everything and got blamed anyway, people who were always the backbone, until the family decided to pretend they never had a spine. I didn't reply. It wasn't about revenge. It was release. Sierra never called again. A cheap bouquet arrived on my porch 3 days later. Carnations drooping and unwatered. No note. I left them outside. Let the wind decide where they belonged. That afternoon, I'd found myself planting herbs again. My hands sank into soil, not bitterness. There was peace in getting dirt under my fingernails, in pulling weeds without metaphors. I paused under the morning light the next day, robes swaying in the breeze, coffee steaming in my hands. The birds had already started gossiping from the power lines, and I let them talk. Nature could talk all it wanted. I wasn't hiding anymore. They had tried to write me out, but I wasn't born for the background. I was born to write my own story. I've learned something about silence. It's not weakness. Not always. Sometimes silence is strategy. Sometimes it's protection. And sometimes silence is the breath you take before you rise. So to anyone watching this, maybe you've been there, seated near the restroom while everyone else dances. Maybe your kindness was mistaken for invisibility. Maybe you've smiled through betrayal, laughed so you wouldn't cry. And maybe that was your sign, not to fight louder, but to walk away quieter and build your own table, because the ones who see you don't need a spotlight to find you. And this time, I didn't walk away. I rose. You're still here? That means something in this story probably hit a little too close to home. Maybe it was the moment Odellin realized she wasn't forgotten. She was erased. Maybe it was when she chose not to scream for space, but to build her own table instead. Here's the truth. In every family, there's someone expected to be quiet, to give without recognition, to sit near the restroom while others toast to each other's greatness. But sometimes, walking away isn't giving up. It's reclaiming yourself. So let me ask you, have you ever been written out of a story you helped build? Tell us in the comments. And if you felt this, if you saw yourself in Odellin, hit that subscribe button for more real, raw family stories that pull back the curtain on what we don't say out loud. This is more than storytelling. This is family drama, with a voice that finally says, "No more."